Hello and welcome back to the Wee Larder channel. Today I'm going to be making a delicious venison pie. Now I absolutely love eating this pie during the autumn and winter months. It's just such a hearty meal, especially after you've been out in the cold weather as well and you're coming back from a walk with the family. It's really nice to know that this is ready and waiting to go in the oven. So I've actually used a really simple pastry for the top of this pie, but you can actually use puff pastry as well. I am just not the best at making pastry, I will admit. So I quite often buy the shop bought puff pastry. I've used a really simple pastry in this recipe, and if you want to use puff pastry, feel free to just swap it out and use your own puff pastry on top. It does work really well with the puff, and I will show a picture of the pie with the puff pastry on my Instagram page very soon. So let's get started on this recipe, guys. So for your venison squash and blackberry pie, you're going to need for your slow cooker pie filling 1 onion, 3 to 4 chopped carrots, 500 grams of cubed venison, 2 chopped potatoes, half a cup of flour, a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of allspice, black pepper, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, half of a butternut squash chopped, handful of blackberries, or you can use wild blackberries as well, like brambles, 250 ml of water, and a tablespoon of butter. And if you're making your own pastry, for the short crust pastry, you're going to need 300 grams of plain flour, a pinch of salt, 150 grams of butter, and 3 tablespoons of cold water. And you can also use shop bought puff pastry, as I mentioned before, as well, so you don't have to make your own pastry if you don't want to. So we're just going to start this recipe off by warming up our slow cooker and adding in our onion and adding in our carrots as well. And then we're going to add in our chopped venison. Now, as you can see, everything is chopped fairly chunky, so it's entirely up to your own preference, but I like to keep it quite chunky because it does melt down a little bit in the slow cooker. We're also going to add in our potatoes and our flour as well, and our salt. Now we're going to add in our spices, so we're going to add in our allspice, and we're also going to add in our black pepper as well. And our cinnamon. Now you can measure things out using a teaspoon if you want to. I just kind of do things by eye. So we're just going to stir everything round so that all the meat and vegetables are coated in the flour. We're going to add in our butternut squash now and our handful of blackberries. And if you're picking wild blackberries, they will be a little bit smaller than this. Or most of them are that I have picked anyway. And we're just going to add our water in as well, give it a good stir around, and then we're going to pop this on a slow cook for about 4 to 5 hours. It will depend on your own slow cooker, but you'll know when everything is tender, so we want the vegetables to be really soft and the meat really soft as well. So once it's fully cooked, it will look something like this. And you can see everything is cooked really nicely. The butternut squash is just a melt in your mouth texture. And it is just so good. I've added in the butter here as well, and I just find it just adds a little richness to this sauce. And venison can be quite dry as well, so that's why I like to add in the butter for a little bit of extra fat. You don't have to add the butter in if you don't want to, but I just like to add it in. So we're just going to shred some of the larger pieces of venison up using a fork. You can actually take some of the pieces out onto a plate if you find that easier, and you can cut them up into smaller pieces on the plate as well. If you want to keep it really chunky, you can, but I like to chop it up a little bit just because I'm feeding the little ones, so I do like it a little bit smaller. I've left the vegetables really chunky though, it's just the meat that I am chopping up. So we're just going to put it all back into our slow cooker there. And then we're going to transfer our venison meat into our pie dish. And this just looks so delicious. You can mash it up a little bit more in here if you want with a potato masher, but as I say, I like my vegetables a little bit chunky, and they are at melt in the mouth kind of texture anyway. I'm just going to start by adding in our flour to make our pastry and our butter. And we're going to pop our pinch of salt in there as well. Obviously, if you're using your own shop bought pastry, you can skip this entire part. And we're just going to mix those up together. And the kind of consistency we're after is like a breadcrumb type consistency. And once we have that, we are just going to add in our cold water. You can actually do this in a bowl. You don't have to be mixing it up in your mixer. But I just like to use my KitchenAid for almost everything. So, so we're just going to add in our cold water. And you might need more, you might need less. Just a little bit at a time. Just enough to create a really nice dough. So I've speeded up the video here, but I have actually been using quite a slow speed because I don't want to overwork the pastry. So I am just mixing away until the dough is formed. And you can see here that it's a really non-sticky dough and it's really easy to manage as well. So we're just going to take the dough out and just knead it in our hands a little bit. And then we're going to roll it. And if you just take a small piece off, and we're just going to keep that for our decoration for the top. If you're not adding anything decorative on the top of your pie, you don't need to take this bit off. I just added on a little thistle and a wee Scottish flag. So we're just going to roll our pastry out so that it is large enough to fit in our pie dish. And all I'm going to do is pop my rolling pin underneath the pastry and make sure you're using plenty of flour so your pastry doesn't stick to your chopping board as well. Now I've actually made it slightly a bit too small for my dish here, so I'm just stretching it out a little bit further. As I say, I am no pastry chef, so please excuse my inexperience when it comes to making pastry and pies. And I was still slightly too small here, but it was just enough to cover the pie. So it worked fine. It was absolutely fine. But you can make it a little bit bigger if you need to. And I've just used a fork just to decorate the sides as well. You can also trim it as well if you want it a bit neater than mine. Mine's is a bit rustic and rough and ready around the edges. But that's usually how most of my cooking is. It's real. So I'm carving out my little thistle here, and I'm no pastry artist, but I've just carved out a little thistle, and I have used my fork just to decorate the thistle on the top here as well. You could also use like cookie cutters or something to cut out your pastry and just to pop on the top of your pie. That would also work really well and get the kids involved, get them helping. They love to do stuff like that in my house. So I'm just popping it on the top here. You could have also added in a little bit of milk to stick it to the rest of the pastry. I've also brushed over a small amount of milk on the rest of the pie as well, and I've added on my little flag here and my flowers, my thistle here too. So I forgot to add the milk into the ingredients list, but if you want to, you can brush on some milk here as well. And that is your lovely pie ready to go in the oven. You're going to cook it for about 25 to 30 minutes. So your venison is obviously already cooked. You really are just cooking the pastry. So it's about 160 to 180 depending on your oven. So please keep a close eye. You just want to brown this and just cook the pastry. As I say, the venison is completely cooked, so it really is just the pastry you're cooking. So pop it in the oven and it's going to look like something like this when it is finished. And that is my delicious pie ready to be cut into and served. Now I've actually served my pie up with some Brussels sprouts and some broccoli as well. You could also fry up some cabbage or some kale or some creamed spinach would work really well here as well. Or you could roast some parsnips. All sorts of seasonal vegetables would work with this pie. If you were making this dish out of season, you could use a salad on the side if it was a summer as well. But I like to keep these hearty dishes for the colder months. I also served my venison up with a tablespoon of horseradish in the middle, and you could also use like a red currant jelly or like a crab apple jelly would work really well with this, or my kids even just had some ketchup, but they will literally have ketchup with anything. So, and I love Brussels sprouts as well. I'm probably like one of the only people in my persons in my family that loves Brussels sprouts, but. They are just so delicious, and we grew them one year as well, and they were so nice. So I hope you enjoyed making your own hearty venison pie. I absolutely love this recipe in the autumn and winter months. It just works so well on a cold day, especially after like a walk in the woods or something. It's just so delicious. So I also will be posting the puff pastry version on my Instagram page, so if you're not, follow me on there, pop over and say hello. And if you do make this recipe and you've taken a photo of it, please feel free to tag me on Instagram and I'll share it in my stories as well. If you're new to this channel as well, a big welcome to you, and please feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I've got lots of new delicious recipes coming out very soon, and if you subscribe and hit that little bell next to it, you'll be notified of my new videos coming out. So take care, and I will see you all again soon. Lots of love. Bye.